Welcome everybody. So I want to continue working with our scatter plots and working with ggplot2 and just kind of review what we can do if we've got a basic plot, or maybe not such a basic plot, but I've got a plot in ggplot2 and I've got it all set up so that it's representing kind of the main data-driven features nicely, and I've experimented with all of the different aesthetics and I've got it all mapped out nicely. And so all that's left for me to do is polish it off with more of the kind of non-data based attributes of the graph, like adding the titles and the fonts and other various elements of the plot. So the plot that I want to go back and think about is we're going to work with the penguins data frame. We're going to create a scatter plot where we've got body mass as the predictor variable on the x-axis, bill length on the y-axis, and we're going to map species to the color and shape attributes. And then we're going to add a smoother to the plot using a linear model. And we're going to map this. We're going to create a separate linear model for each of the three species because we mapped the species to these attributes globally in the ggplot function, as opposed to locally in any of the individual geomes. So all of these aesthetics are mapped globally, so they're all going to get passed through both the point and the smooth geome. So I'm going to run this code. This is going to create the scatter plot and add these linear model smoothers. It's going to store this plot to this object that I'm going to call ggpen for penguin. And I want to print this to the screen so I know what I'm looking at. So here's my plot. And again, you're going to want to make sure that you've loaded up and installed these packages in this notebook. If you're just like tuning in for the very first time, you've missed a lot of good stuff. So you're going to want to make sure you catch up with the packages so that you can just jump right in and get this code cell to run. So here's the kind of base layer that we're working with. So I'm real happy, at least with the way the data is being presented in this plot, but I want to clean up some of the labels and I want to move the legend and things like that. So this question is saying, let's go ahead, add a title and labels to the axes. Let's use one of the built-in themes to clean it up. You can choose which theme you like, and then we're going to move the legend to the bottom and increase the font size, since I think the fonts are pretty small when we are constructing them using Google Colab. So for the title and axes, we can add a layer using the labs function. So just recall that anytime I add a layer, I take the previous ggplot, I add a layer with the plus sign, and here I'm going to add the labs layer, and you can kind of come up with your own labels. But here I've got body mass on the x-axis, bill length on the y-axis, and I can call something like penguin body characteristics or some sort of title like that. And so I've got my previous plot. I've added a new layer. I'm going to store the result back on top of ggpen. And let's take a look at what we get. So now we've got label, title, label, label on our axes. Next, we can play around with the themes. And again, there are all sorts of themes that you could play around with. And so if you want to play around with them, you can go GG theme. And again, you can see the whole list of themes. What does Panzer do? I'm always curious. And these will kind of do some built-in changes. Ooh, that's a nice one. I think I might use Panther from now on. So this is a nice one. It removes the kind of gray paneling. It keeps the grid lines in the background, and it actually bold-faced the title, which was not in boldface before. But it does not boldface the axes labels. So you can play around with all these various themes. If you want to try another one, here's theme classic, which does something kind of similar. This one makes the X and the Y axes a little bit bolder and takes out the grid lines if they're not that helpful in a scatter plot. But you can choose whichever theme you like. And then if we want to lastly change the legend position and the font size, we can further fine tune the themes by adding an additional layer with the theme. So now I take the previous plot, which I stored again to ggpen. So I took the previous plot, added the classic theme to it. Now I'm going to take that plot and just tweak it a little bit to move the legend to the bottom and increase the text size. And out comes this plot over here. So now the text size, the font size is a little bit bigger. And this legend, which was on the right, gets moved down to the bottom. And there's a pretty nice looking plot. Again, we should try and keep these plots as accessible to as many people as possible. So that includes people that might have trouble differentiating colors. So red and green are particularly colors that some people have difficulty differentiating. So there is a nice function called scale color colorblind. This is not in the ggplot2 package. So if you just try and add this function to your plot, you're going to get an error because it's not going to find this function. So if you want to use this function, you're going to need to install the GG themes package because this is not installed in Colab. And then you're going to need to load it with the library command. You may have already done this within the first code cell. You did install and load this package. If it's been a while since you ran that first code cell, I did include these commands here. And now what I want to do is just take this previous plot that we stored in ggpen and change the coloring. And I can change the coloring with this function, which is scale color colorblind. I'm going to store it back into ggpen, and let's see how that adjusts the coloring. So it just changes the scaling, which was red, green, and blue, to like a black, a gold, and a light blue, which is the contrast of these colors are easier for people that are colorblind to pick up on that differentiation of color. So here's a nice looking plot for these three species, looking at the relationship between body mass and bill length separately for each of these three species. Okay, so we'll stop this video over here. And in the next video, as you can see, we'll move on and talk about how we can use faceting as another mechanism in addition to aesthetics to kind of look for lurking variables and look at relationships between different variables in our data set. Thanks.